The Hamilton construction incident. The city air hung thick and heavy, a cocktail of exhaust fumes and the cloying sweetness of whatever the Stelco plant was brewing up that day. I hated Hamilton, always had, but the pay was good, and the Hamilton construction gate promised even better. Demolishing that old textile factory on Wellington Street was the first step in building some fancy condos, the kind with luxury amenities no one ever uses. I was a young buck then, fresh out of trade school, eager to prove myself. The crew was a motley bunch, the usual suspects, grizzled veterans with nicotine-stained fingers and calloused hands, fresh-faced kids like me, and a foreman named Big Joe, who looked like he'd been carved from a granite mountain. The first few weeks were standard demolition fare, dust, noise, and the satisfying crunch of metal under the jaws of the excavator. Then we hit something solid. What the hell is that? Big Joe barked, spitting a stream of tobacco juice that landed dangerously close to my boots. The excavator operator, a guy named Benny, hopped down, wiping sweat from his brow. We all crowded around the newly exposed section of earth. It was a wall, made of stone unlike anything I'd ever seen. Smooth, dark, and almost organic. It hummed faintly under my hand, a vibration that tickled my teeth. Big Joe, ever practical, just shrugged. Probably an old foundation. Bust through it. That's when things started to go sideways. The jackhammers wouldn't penetrate the stone. The metal shrieked and sparked, but the wall remained unscathed. Finally, Benny brought in the heavy-duty excavator. With agonizing slowness, the stone cracked, revealing not more foundation, but a gaping black maw. A tunnel. The air that poured out of it was cold, not just cool, but bone-chilling. It smelled of damp earth and something else, something ancient and indescribably foul. I swore I could feel it clinging to my skin, a greasy film of dread. We cautiously entered the tunnel, Big Joe reluctantly leading the way with a powerful flashlight. The walls were smooth, too smooth for natural rock. They felt sculpted. The air grew colder, heavier, until each breath was a struggle, then we saw it. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, a subterranean ruin unlike anything I could have imagined. Massive stone pillars supported a ceiling that seemed to disappear into the darkness. Carvings covered every surface, grotesque figures with elongated limbs, twisted faces, and eyes that seemed to follow you. The language was alien, a series of jagged symbols unlike anything I'd ever seen in a history book. It felt wrong, fundamentally wrong. In the center of the chamber, resting on a pedestal, was an artifact. A sphere of obsidian, pulsating with a faint, inner light. It radiated an aura of power, of malevolence, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. We didn't touch anything. We just stared, mesmerized and terrified in equal measure. Big Joe, for once speechless, just turned and silently led us back to the surface. That should have been the end of it. We should have called the authorities, reported what we found. But we didn't. Maybe it was the awe, the sheer impossibility of what we had witnessed. Maybe it was the unspoken understanding that this was something we couldn't explain. The next day, Benny didn't show up for work. They found him in his apartment, kneeling in front of his television, eyes gouged out with a spoon. The police ruled it a suicide. Then it was Old Man Henderson. He started ranting about demons and whispers in the dark, carving symbols into his arms with a rusty nail. He died in the hospital, screaming about the eyes that never sleep. Fear became a constant companion. We tried to talk to each other, to make sense of what was happening, but the words caught in our throats, strangled by the growing sense of dread. I started having nightmares, visions of the ruins, the pulsating sphere, the grotesque carvings seared into my mind. The artifact was changing us. Corrupting us. Then came Marcus, one of the younger guys. He went completely silent, barely acknowledging our presence. One afternoon, I found him standing at the edge of the excavation site, staring blankly into the open pit. Before I could stop him, he jumped. That's when the black SUVs arrived. Men in dark suits, faces unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses, swarmed the site. They barked orders, cordoned off the area, and confiscated our phones. They called themselves federal agents, but they moved with a cold efficiency that suggested something else entirely. Big Joe tried to protest, but they silenced him with a look. We were herded into a trailer, interrogated for hours. They wanted to know everything, what we saw, what we touched, what we thought. They drilled us about the tunnel, the chamber, the artifact, then came the threat. Subtle, but unmistakable. Our families, our futures, our lives, all hanging in the balance. We were told to forget everything. To to deny everything. To never speak of the Hamilton construction incident again. We signed the documents, the non-disclosure agreements, the legally binding oaths of silence. We were paid handsomely, but the money felt like blood money. They filled the tunnel, cemented it shut, buried the ruins under tons of concrete and steel. The fancy condos were built, just like they planned. But I never passed by that block without feeling a shiver of fear crawl up my spine. I left Hamilton soon after. Tried to forget. But the nightmares never stopped. The faces of Benny, Henderson, and Marcus haunt me still. I'm writing this now, years later, because I can't carry the weight of it anymore. I know they're watching, listening. I know this will likely bring down hell on my head. But someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember what happened under Wellington Street in Hamilton. Because I fear, with every fiber of my being, that whatever we unearth down there is not truly dead. It's just waiting. And one day, it will be hungry again.